Alright, today we are back with a brand new interview with Naoki Hamaguchi where he gives us some new details on Final Fantasy VII Remake Part 3, including the game's opening location. We'll also take a look at some interesting photos from some of the English voice actors that could hint at an ensemble recording for a specific section of Remake Part 3. So, let's talk about it. Alright, starting off first with those interesting photos posted by Cody, Christian, and Britt Barron, who are the English voices for Cloud and Tifa respectively. Because on Thursday of this week, both of them posted photos from the recording studio, and you might be thinking, oh, well, that's nothing new. But it's the same studio with the same carpet, and it's really big, much bigger than the studios they normally record in. And they posted both of these photos on their Instagram stories around the same time as one another, which is leading myself and other people to believe we could potentially be getting a scene in Remake Part 3 where Cody and Britt actually get to record together. Now, let's, do the normal rational thing. Get this out of the way. Maybe they just happen to be scheduled the same night to do their voiceover session, which happens, An actor goes in, they do 4 to 6 hours, they leave, and as they're leaving, the next actor comes in to do their stuff. And maybe they decided to coordinate these posts to play with us because they know we're all a bunch of little freaks that are gonna overanalyze everything they say and post in regards to this game. That's a possibility. Or they could be recording together, which is super exciting. And it could be for a specific scene, which I will get to very shortly. Now, this would be considered what's called an ensemble recording. You might be wondering, what's an ensemble? Anything that involves 2 or more people in the recording booth recording at the same time is considered an ensemble recording session, which you don't see a lot because they are very difficult to pull off, especially if your game or your TV show or your movie is working with source material that is not in English. So if it started in Japanese, you now have to translate that and kind of try to match the Japanese dub of whatever you're working on. So timing of the line delivery, matching the lip sync or the intention of the Japanese actors. So it's a very intricate process to go through, and you don't see it a lot just because it's so difficult. It's already hard to do one person in a studio. Now you got to worry about 2, so you usually don't see it very often. And this would technically be unprecedented for the 7 Remake trilogy should they actually be doing an ensemble recording session, because all of the VO for the 7 Remake trilogy so far has been individual recordings, meaning one actor in the booth doing their dialogue, their battle efforts for 4 to 6 hours, and then another session is another actor. So this would be brand new for the 7 Remake trilogy. However, Square Enix has done this before, specifically with Final Fantasy XVI. In the early stages of the recording process for that game, the actors actually got to perform their scenes together in an ensemble. And that's because with Final Fantasy XVI, it was a rare project in the sense that 16 was actually voiced and did all of the facial capture in English first instead of Japanese like most Final Fantasy games. So they didn't have to worry about lip sync or intention or matching the timing of a piece of dialogue. They could just do it all in English first. However, I believe this was around the time that COVID started happening, so they unfortunately could not do the entire game as an ensemble. They had to go back to the individual recordings for each of the actors, but they've done it before. Now, let's assume they are doing at least one ensemble scene for Cody and Britt for Cloud and Tifa. What scene could they be doing? My brain goes to the live stream sequence, although Under the High Wind is a possibility too. Both of these sequences are intimate for different reasons. And again, intimate doesn't always mean, sexual or in that type of nature. Intimate can just mean close. But my speculation is the live stream sequence, and that's a sequence that is incredibly delicate and it needs to feel genuine and natural and again incredibly intimate because it's Tifa and Cloud working together. She's trying to save his life and get his mind put together properly. So it would make sense that in order to get that proper chemistry and performance out of the actors and the characters, they would want them to be able to record together and actually have the ability to play off of one another, which would bring out a completely new dynamic for these actors and their performances. Now, what's really cool is that since all of the dialogue so far in this trilogy has been in individual recording sessions, the acting, the voice direction, the writing has been so good that you can't really tell. When characters have conversations with one another, they feel like genuine conversations between 2, 3, 4 people that are in the same room, actually looking at each other and communicating. Now, imagine what we could get if 2 of those actors were actually working together at the same time, being able to bounce off of one another's performances. If that is what they end up doing for a section of this game, then we could potentially, in my opinion, be getting one of the best sequences in the Remake trilogy. So should this be an actual ensemble recording? Should it be for the live stream sequence? It's going to be really cool to see and hear the performances in that scene, to feel and hear how they sound different and how they stand out. If Cody and Britt are actually getting to work together, I think that could be pretty cool. Also, I did a little bit more sleuthing, and the device you see in Britt's photo is something called a Furman HR2, which from what I can tell is meant for dual recording, so more than one person. So maybe that's just standard equipment. I'm not a voice actor. I've never been in a studio like that in a professional setting, but it just makes me think, like, if you got a device that's meant for dual recording and Cody and Britt both posted photos in the studio at the same time, man, if they're doing this on purpose to mess with people, then that is hilarious, and they know how much we all are just like dying to see and hear from them in regards to part 3. Now, speaking of part 3, we got a brand new interview with Naoki Hamaguchi that is coming to us from Jason Schreier, who is very well respected within the industry, and he's reporting for Bloomberg. Now, just to kind of put this out there, normally with Bloomberg, you gotta pay to read their articles. However, I clicked on the link to read the article on Twitter via Genki, and it said I was gifted a subscription to read said article. But just in case, to cover my butt and to avoid any issues, unfortunately, I won't be putting the quotes on the screen like I normally do, just for fear of Bloomberg raining down fire on my channel. So apologies for those who like to read along with the quotes. I want to be kind of careful here. And also, just a heads up, this interview took place back when Hamaguchi was promoting Final Fantasy VII Remake's release on the Switch 2 in New York, which I believe was in December of last year. So some of the info is outdated. I will try to correct it when that happens. Also, Jason mentions that there will be another interview sometime way later in the future that I think is going to focus specifically on Hamaguchi and his life and his career. So that'll be something to look out for. Maybe they'll release that later in the summer when part 3 news actually happens and they want to kind of get more stuff out there. But we start off first with Hamaguchi saying that part 3 at this time did not have a title. Again, this was before Nomura actually picked a title. He was hoping in the not too distant future, again, not too far future, to release more info, but he does say expect information to hit this year. So for some people who are like, we're never getting it, it will happen this year. I'm guessing again around the time of Summer Game Fest. Up next, Hamaguchi talks about new gameplay elements that are coming to part 3 that were not in the first 2. And he goes on to say, we didn't want the 3 installments to be a reskinning of the same game over and over again. He said, speaking through an interpreter, we want to make sure we're expanding with every installment in terms of scale, as well as retaining that freshness as you go into each installment, which is something that he said before. He wants each game to feel different, which is one of the reasons why I don't know if they would ever try to stitch all 3 games together in one package, because they are so different. There's also the issue of like game logic coming into play. The combat in Rebirth is very different from the combat in Remake. The combat in part 3 is probably going to differ somewhat from Rebirth as well. So you would have to go back and completely rebalance and retool enemies and their environments, I think, in Remake to try and have similar gameplay, unless the gameplay changes just became more of a progression thing as you got further into the game. But again, for those of you who maybe weren't crazy about Rebirth, don't expect part 3 to feel the same. This should feel like its own standalone game. Of course, the story, will still be connected, but gameplay-wise, it should feel very different. And I'm really excited to see more details about that. I'm really hoping we get an open world that is a nice balance of allowing the player to explore freely on their own, while maybe having some sections that have some checklisty things, or maybe just some info info that you can kind of use to then go off of and then do exploration on your own. I want to be running around and find a hidden enemy that's a super boss battle, or find a materia cave that has some really cool enemies and materia and weapons in it, and I want to be able to find that on my own. It's really cool when you can run around and just explore an environment and come across those types of experiences and surprises. And based on what the devs have said in past interviews, they're very well aware that people want that type of spontaneous exploration, and I would expect that to be in Part 3 as well. And of course, he reiterates that they have their foundation for Part 3 in place, and now for the gameplay and all that stuff, it's really just about fine-tuning and polishing until the game's actual release. He also talks about staff retention for Remake Part 3. Now, going from Remake to Rebirth, I believe Hamaguchi said about 80% of the staff remain the same. Jumping from Rebirth to Part 3, that is now 95% of the same people that worked on Rebirth working on Part 3, which again makes things much smoother, much faster. Everyone knows what they need to do, where they need to be, how to do certain gameplay systems, who they need to communicate with. And Hamaguchi, again, seems to be a very great project manager, managing very, very large groups of people, which is pretty difficult. Now up next, Jason Schreier hits Hamaguchi with some rapid fire questions. They will not be rapid on my end, because I will stop and give my thoughts and opinions on what Hamaguchi says. But he starts off first, asking Hamaguchi, will Rocket Town be in the game? Hamaguchi says, yeah. This is one of the elements we had to switch around with Rebirth, yes. So obviously some locations did get swapped around just in terms of the storytelling and how to kind of work it best for the story that they're telling in the Remake trilogy. So we haven't gotten to Rocket Town yet. Sid was also a much later addition in Rebirth, and again, there's those criticisms of Sid's not Sid, he should be smoking, he should be swearing, but we haven't gotten to Rocket Town yet. And I think when we go to Rocket Town, that's when those wounds will reopen and Sid will become more crotchety, more angry. A lot of that anger that he's feeling, the weight of what's happened, his dreams being crushed, I think will eventually come out. Because again, in Rebirth, Sid was a professional offering a service to the party. He didn't open up to them. He didn't particularly care to want to get to know them at first. He's like, I'm here to shuttle you around. And then it's not until towards the end of the game when he starts to get wrapped up in what's going on with Sephiroth and the Temple of the Ancients, and finding out that, hey, Aerith, I knew your mom. I saw you when you were a little kid. So he's basically a professional offering a service. He's not going to pour his heart out to the crew right away. But I would expect once we get to Part 3, that's when Sid will come out. Up next, what about Wutai? Hamaguchi says it's one of the main locations. Yuffie's made a very prominent appearance, stating her case about her homeland. So if Wutai's not featured, I think the fans are going to yell at me. 100%. Again, there's so much that could happen in Wutai. There's the stuff with Yuffie and the loss of her culture, and Wutai being this touristy area now that is just kind of, I don't know what the word would be that I'm looking for here, but it's not what she grew up with. It's kind of appeasing, outsiders and tourists because of Shinra's involvement. But there's also the war with Wutai. There could be a really big battle that breaks out there and leads to Midgar, or vice versa. There's the potential reappearance of Nero, maybe puppeting the body of Sonon to mess with Yuffie. There's the family drama with Yuffie. There's a lot that could happen there. And I'm very curious to see where in the structure of Part 3 they slot Wutai in. Could it be the middle of the story? Could it be towards the end? It's pretty fascinating to think about that stuff. Also, what summon are we going to get in Wutai? We already got Leviathan. I'm very curious to see who shows up there instead. Up next, Jason says, will the High Wind let you fly anywhere? Hamaguchi says, we want to expand on the gameplay experience. Flying the High Wind is a very large part of the third installment. Let me leave it at that. Again, people will riot if we can't use the High Wind the way it was in the original game. And the High Wind mechanics I'm still very curious about. The High Wind itself is huge. You want to make sure that the world you're exploring is equally as big, if not bigger, to justify using a High Wind. I've said this in a previous video, but Ghost of Yotei has some of the best world design, interaction, and exploration I've ever experienced in a video game. The side quests are all organically integrated into the story already. If you want to go to a bulletin board and grab a side quest, you can, but if you just happen to be exploring and you come across a duel or a cave or a side quest before you've even picked it up at the bulletin board, you can just up and do it. It's all there already, and it's so beautifully designed that that's what I would love to see for part 3. A world where I actually want to fly the high wind or run around or get a chocobo and not fast travel. You know, I want to explore these lands and actually have the desire to do so. And again, that kind of goes hand in hand with the exploration stuff of having it feel natural and organic and not super overwhelming and checklisty. So there's going to be a fine balance there. But again, the moment we see the high wind stuff, that's going to be just insane. I cannot wait to see what they have planned for that. Up next, what about chocobo breeding? Hamaguchi says, I can't say yay or nay on the actual breeding, but there is an element in the 3rd installment involving chocobos that is a little different than Rebirth. That I'm kind of mixed on. I don't know if I want chocobo breeding, because if you have a situation where you do have the chocobo breeding in the original game, it was pretty in-depth. There was a lot of RNG there as well when it came to mating your chocobos. Were you going to get the one that you wanted? It's a really tedious process, but it's very rewarding because you get the gold chocobo and you can get the Knights of the Round. And in regards to the Knights of the Round, I think they might incorporate that into the story of part 3 instead of it just being a side thing that you can do if you want or just skip if you want. But as long as we don't have to go to locations and do the little chocobo mini game to grab our chocobo, I think I'm fine. It was cute at first, but by the time I got to Cosmo Canyon, I'm like, I just want my chicken, man. I just want to grab my chicken. I want to explore, but you had to do some of the extra legwork. So I'm curious to see how they change up the chocobo stuff. Him saying he can't say yay or nay, again, that could go either way. That could mean there is no chocobo breeding, or they could have come up with something new in place of the breeding. No idea. Next, will we go to space? Hamaguchi says, I'll keep that a secret, but considering Rocket Town is a yes, yeah, we're going to space. We're going to jump in that rocket. We're going to have that beautiful scene where Sid looks down on the planet and realizes how small it truly is and how much it needs to be protected. Could there be space combat, space exploration? I don't know if they'd want to go that far. You probably could just leave the space stuff how it was in the OG game where it's super linear, it's all story stuff, but you get some really great character moments. The next one we've all been questioning. Will we go underwater? Hamaguchi says, it's an interesting question because Motomo Toriyama handled the submarine portion of the game, so perhaps he has injected himself into there. And I will leave it at that. Now, I don't know if he means Toriyama worked on the submarine section of the original FF7 or if he's breaking info here and saying, yeah, the sub is going to be in part 3. Take that with a grain of salt. We don't know how his, intentions were when he said this. Either way, I would expect the sub to be in part 3. Underwater travel in particular, I'm very curious about because does it become this really big, expansive thing where the underwater exploration is just as deep as the on-land exploration? Will there be extra areas we can go to? Because we gotta fight Emerald Weapon. How are we gonna fight the Emerald Weapon? Underwater materia. How is that fight gonna work? What's the size of the weapons going to be? Which I've seen some people talk about the size of the Ultima weapon that's in Ever Crisis. Here's what I'll say. Enemies in Ever Crisis, scale-wise, tend to be a little smaller than they are in the Remake trilogy, just because of technical limitations. So the size of enemies in Ever Crisis I don't think is a really good litmus test for what they will be in part 3. I would also expect him to look a little different in part 3. But the underwater stuff, man, oh man, my brain is running a mile a minute of like, wow, what do they do with that? Because if you find a way to do underwater combat, it could be like a Final Fantasy X situation where only certain characters can do combat within the water, like a Cloud or a Tifa, probably a Yuffie, maybe Vincent, but like Barrett, Sid, Red, Kate, probably not capable of that because that's how it was in 10. Tidus could do stuff underwater, Riku and Waka, but everyone else, it was a no-go. So I'm very curious to see how they handle that. But it'll probably be a situation where the underwater materia just allows every character to move and operate and fight underwater as they would on land. So that way when you are in the water, you're not locked to a specific group of characters and you can't use Barrett or Red or whatnot. Now the next question, and possibly the biggest of this whole article. Jason asks, will the Great Glacier area be as big as it is in the original game? Hamaguchi says, because it is a major element in the game, I won't go deep into details, but considering that toward the end of Rebirth, we're in the Forgotten City, and in the original, you would go into Icicle Inn from there. I guess that hints at how the third installment will begin. I hope the players will look forward to it. Yeah, that makes sense. Starting off in the Icicle Inn area, again, when you finish Rebirth, Cloud tells the party, we need to go up north. Sephiroth, he's hiding up north. How do I know? Soldier intuition, but at that point, Cloud is full-on astronaut. He's gone full macadamian, but the party is still trusting him. So opening up in Icicle Inn, the glacier area, makes the most sense from the story progression standpoint. Again, there's the elements too of snowboarding. Do we just snowboard down the hill? Is the snowboard something that becomes an exploration mechanic? I'm also curious, and this has been brought up on my channel before, do the characters get winter-specific clothing? Because it would look kind of weird if they're walking around without winter clothing, but if they don't, I could see why. In the original game, I do remember there were certain areas of the Great Glacier where it was so cold that you had to stop and warm up your character through a mini game. And saying that, some people might go, oh no, a mini game? But the whole point was just to do squats to warm up your body. I could see that mechanic making a return to stop your characters from freezing should they not have the proper attire in that area, or even if they do have the proper attire, they would still want to keep warm some way. But opening up in that area again gives a really great opportunity for a good opening boss fight. I forget the name of the enemy, but there's that two-headed dragon-like monster in the ice cave. I think they called it Schizo, which is maybe not what you want to call it these days. Again, the translation of OG FF7, very rushed, but that would provide for a really cool area to explore, get the player comfortable with doing new free exploration inside of the glacier area as well as the cave, doing a proper boss battle that could introduce elements of damaging the environment, really allowing the player to kind of figure out, okay, I see a chest over there, or I see a piece of materia, but I don't see a convenient path. How am I going to find a way to go get there? Let the player do it on their own. Of course, again, you know, there's that balance there that I think would be nice of some hand holding in certain areas, maybe just to kind of get you going, and then the rest is all you, the player. But starting off there, Glacier area, seems like that is where part 3 is going to be opening up. And I'm very curious to see, speaking of, you know, Cloud and Tifa as we spoke earlier in the video, what's their dynamic going to be like? What's Cloud's dynamic going to be like in the party now? Because he's full on lost it, and I only imagine things are going to get worse. But also, probably most importantly, what else happens in that Great Glacier area? The Whirlwind Maze, finding Sephiroth's body, Cloud giving the black materia to Sephiroth. And again, I've hypothesized in previous videos that we could lose Cloud very early on in this game. So imagine, we open up with that Great Glacier area and we make it pretty early on to Sephiroth. Cloud snaps, gives the black materia to Sephiroth, and then we have to fight a Cloud that has lost his mind. Maybe he's being possessed by Genova or Sephiroth, and that is another big opening battle, but it's also a really big oh shit moment because we're still very early on in this game, and we've just lost Cloud. He is now down and out until he recovers a little bit later on. So it's really interesting to see how they could break that up. Do they want us to lose Cloud that early on and not have him in the party for a little bit, which I think would be fine. We have the new additions of Sid and Vincent, and getting used to their combat could be super cool. But again, Cloud boss battle, maybe leading up to that point, his moveset is a little bit more aggressive, more Dark Knight, Prime Cloud. He's much more violent. That could be a really spectacular opening to that game. A few hours in and boom, you lose Cloud because of Sephiroth and the black materia, and that entire area just decides to implode on itself, and you gotta exit through the high wind, which could then lead to all of the crazy shenanigans that happen in Junon with Tifa and Barrett being executed, all kinds of stuff. The opening hours of part 3, maybe the opening 5 hours, 10 hours, are looking like they're going to be super explosive, and I cannot wait. With that being said, that's the video. Let me know in the comments down below what you guys thought on what we covered in today's video, specifically those potential teases from Cody and Britt about them being in the studio at the same time, or this interview that we covered with Naoki Hamaguchi talking about part 3. Let me know in the comments down below, how do you think the opening of part 3 is going to progress? Do you think we could lose Cloud that early on, or do you think maybe they want to change up how that happens? Again, Cloud could maybe give the black materia to Sephiroth in a different location. He could snap at a different point in time in the story. We don't know, but it's going to be exciting to see how it turns out. I am Curious Corduroy. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.